Why did ancient maps show Antarctica without ice? Hi everyone. Number 4. Did you know that there are maps showing Antarctica without ice made by Europeans before they ever discovered it? Well, they didn't really make these maps. They copied them from much older maps, some as old as 2,000 years, showing the world as we know it today, with all of the continents in their current forms, but without any ice caps at either pole. And this isn't just limited to Antarctica. There are maps showing the Arctic Circle without ice too. So how could people have known what was down there if they never actually discovered it? It doesn't make sense. The idea that the poles were once covered in ice is relatively new, dating back only about 300 million years. That's only a few blinks of an eye compared to the age of the planet. So how did ancient mapmakers know that there wasn't supposed to be any ice there? Before we get into that, let's look at one of the most famous of these old maps. This is Piri Reis's world map. It's a world map created by a Turkish admiral named Piri Reis in 1513. What makes this map so famous is that it seems to show Antarctica without any ice, even though it was made more than 100 years before the first confirmed sighting of Antarctica in 1820. How could he have known about the continent's existence without having discovered it himself? Well, part of the reason that this map is so famous is because of speculation that ancient civilizations like the Egyptians or even Atlantis had actually mapped the world, perhaps even using advanced technology, and that this knowledge was somehow lost throughout history until Piri Reis came across it. But there's no evidence to support this claim. We do know that Piri Reis used other maps to make his map, and it's likely that these other maps also showed Antarctica without ice. But why would they have done that? One of the most popular theories among conspiracy theorists is that the maps were accurate representations of the world when they were made, which means that Antarctica really wasn't covered in ice back then. But there's no evidence to support this theory either. The idea that Antarctica was ice-free in historical times contradicts everything that we know about the continent is geological history. The Antarctic ice sheet started forming around 34 million years ago, although it was not nearly as extensive as it is now. During this time, Antarctica was still a part of the supercontinent Gondwanaland, which also included South America, Africa, Australia, and the Indian subcontinent. As the Atlantic Ocean began to form between Antarctica and South America, the East Antarctic ice sheet began to grow. Seawater that had previously been warmed by the Gulf Stream was cut off from Antarctica, allowing the cold water to freeze. Over the next 10 million years, the ice sheet grew until it reached its current size. So if the ice sheet has been around for at least 34 million years, why don't we see it on these much older maps? Well, it turns out that we do. If you look closely at Piri Reis's map, you can actually see that Antarctica does have a very small ice cap, smaller than the one that we have today, but still an ice cap nonetheless. So it seems that he and the mapmakers before him knew that at least a part of the continent was covered in ice, but they didn't know that it was completely covered. But why wouldn't they have known that? They had access to pretty accurate maps made by sailors who had circumnavigated the globe. Even if they didn't have access to those maps, they could have extrapolated the shape of Antarctica based on the locations of the other continents. They knew that the world was round, after all. So it seems reasonable to assume that they would have realized that if they knew the shape of South America and Africa, for example, that the two of them fit together like a puzzle, they could reasonably assume that the rest of the continents would fit together in the same way. Perhaps they just didn't realize that a large enough chunk of South America would fit into the blank spot on their maps. But if that were the case, why wouldn't they have explored further to try to find it? The answer, of course, is that they didn't need to explore Antarctica to know what was there. The reason that these maps show Antarctica without ice is not because the mapmakers were geniuses who discovered the continent without ever seeing it, nor is it proof of some ancient civilization with advanced knowledge. It's simply because they had access to more complete maps and chose to ignore them. Thanks for watching.